I just want to give you a bit of context before we jump into the video. I recorded it a while ago, and then I convinced myself that it wasn't ready yet, so I let it sit on my hard drive for 3 years. But then my leak till taught me that done is better than perfect. Hey y'all, if you want to get straight to the recipe, then go here. But if you're currently considering giving up white sugar for good, then stick around. I have a history lesson for you, plus a personal story of how I use mindfulness rooted in history to give up white sugar and start using alternative sweeteners. 10 years ago, I started teaching workshops. And in these workshops, I teach about various culinary cultures and eating lifestyles and the food philosophies, histories, economies, and societies that shape them. In one of these workshops, I taught about our connection to white sugar and the history it's rooted in. Which, if you don't know by now, sugar was one of the major cash crops of the institution of slavery in the Caribbean islands. My family is from the Caribbean, and I've traveled throughout the English, Spanish, and French Caribbean, where I learned about the horrors of the sugar plantations. The sugarcane plantations were the main source and provider for the world's sugar, and enslaved Africans worked those sugar plantations. They were not paid, and they were forced to work extreme hours under brutal conditions. There were no laws nor morals to protect them. There were no factory safety regulations, so oftentimes people were losing entire limbs to the sugarcane extraction mills. Healthcare was either poor or non-existent. Thus, lives were lost and the lifespan was shortened. And because this system didn't see humanity, but rather mechanical able bodies in the enslaved Africans, they replaced them as soon as they lost them. So there's this history of death and destruction tied to sugar. So now in the present day, we're still seeing it. However, how it looks has transformed. We're no longer enslaved through the 1600 to 1900 European model of slavery. Instead, our taste buds and our neuroreceptors in our brains are slaves to the addictive nature and sweetness of white sugar. So now death and destruction show up inside all human bodies in the form of diabetes. And it isn't just our individual bodies that are being destroyed, you all, but our community bodies and our planetary body as well. And the workshops I teach address that, and they stretch our thinking around food. Consequently, while I was teaching these workshops, I was also stretching my own thinking. And as a teacher, you're often a student. And the student in me was having her own personal shift and transformation and struggle through this journey of choosing a dietary lifestyle that was beneficial. I was looking for one that fit my taste buds and fit my vitality. In preparing for my workshops, I found myself critiquing colonized structures within the food systems and how they play a role in what we eat in modern times. I also started looking at colonized structures within my own diet. And that's when I realized I was hooked. I was hooked on sugar.
Giving up is hard to do when you really love someone. Giving up
So I decided that in order to break that, I needed to break up with my favorite bakeries in New York City. Because even though I was giving up white sugar, I wasn't about to give up my favorite sweets and desserts, y'all. So I embraced another way to enjoy them, using ingredients that honored me and didn't destroy me. So as I looked at the cupcakes I love to eat, I thought about how I could make them with ingredients that were a bit more elevated. And taking that into consideration, I said goodbye and I got into my kitchen. Hey, I'm your host, Shelly Wellness. I'm on this journey to elevate our consciousness around food, and I invite you to join me. On this channel, I'll share recipes created with mindfulness, rooted in wellness. Welcome to the Mindful Plate. When you're using coconut sugar has such a strong flavor. It's not like white sugar where it's just bland and sweet. Coconut sugars is way more complex, something more like a caramel note. So I'm going to be using cocoa powder. Now, because I have a coconut sugar but I'm using less sugar, it's also not going to be as sweet. So you're going to get sugar coming from the frosting, but the cake itself needs to taste like something. It needs to have a flavor other than cocoa, because the cocoa can be quite bitter, and without that sugar to sort of bring that bitterness down, you're going to need a spice to do that same job. I have pumpkin spice, I have cardamom, I have cinnamon, several types, I have ginger. All of these can pair with chocolate, but the challenge is, for example, something like cardamom you smell and it literally, it takes over. It easily can be like, I'm the star of the show. So with this one, the way that you sort of get a feeling for what's going to best support this chocolate is you just want to take the spices and smell them together and notice which one stays. This one for sure is still here, so we don't want that. So instead, there's this pumpkin pie spice. I'm gonna try. The cocoa came through, but the pumpkin spice is very much ringing like fall, but it also is screaming its name louder, and I need cocoa to be the note. Like, I want this to be delivered to me. So let's try cinnamon. So this is Vietnamese cinnamon. The Vietnamese cinnamon is still a little stronger. And then I just got this regular cinnamon. I don't know where it's from. But it's not as strong as the Vietnamese. So, yes, the cocoa stayed. Like, literally, this was like, hi, cocoa. Like, that's what we want. That's what we want. So we're going to use cocoa and cinnamon in the batter because this is going to help bring up the flavor, especially when you have less sugar. So now your sugar and your flavor and the chocolate is also great. I'm going to do is I'm going to make a buttermilk. But to make the buttermilk, you're going to take whatever non-dairy milk you prefer and a tablespoon of vinegar, some acid. So this is distilled white vinegar. You could also use lemon juice. And I only need a cup of buttermilk, so what I'm going to do is just pour this up until it reaches the cup line. And the best way to measure, I find, is to get down eye level so I can see. Because if you look overhead, you might mismeasure. Boom. Cup. So I'm just going to let it sit, but I want you to see here what's happening. If you notice, the milk is starting to curdle, just like buttermilk. So this is done. We're just going to set this aside. If you make this ahead of time, you want to sit it at least 5 to 10 minutes, but you'll see it. It'll literally start to just get weird looking. That's our buttermilk. Now this cake is so easy. It's dry and then wet and then baked. You know, some cakes you have to cream, butter, sugar, all that. But when you just want chocolate cake and you want your chocolate cake, like, this is the way to go. Real simple, one bowl cake mix. So we just have flour. And let's talk about this flour for a minute. I was always eating like a lot of baked goods, and I would use just regular all-purpose white flour. But I noticed it bind me up a lot more. So I started using gluten-free flour just because the gluten-free flour keeps me regular. We'll say that. It doesn't stick to my guts like paper mache. And my favorite one is the Trader Joe's all-purpose. This is the coconut sugar that we're going to be using. Reminds me a lot of brown sugar. Then we're going to add cocoa powder. We have baking soda. Instant coffee or instant espresso if you have it. Baking powder. And we're going to add some salt. I'm using Himalayan pink salt and cinnamon. Remember, we were talking about those ingredients lifting and really bringing the cocoa. Like, I want that cocoa to, like, I want it to sing. But I need this to sort of come in first and just deliver it to me. So ground cinnamon. Now, I'm not one for measurements. I just go off of intuition and feeling. So I know about how much I need. And then a lot of times I'll add a little, mix it, taste it, see if I need more, smell it. So let's see. Now, once you have your cake spiced just right, it's time to add your wet to your dry. So you're going to make a well in the center of your dry ingredients and add your eggs or your egg replacer. The buttermilk you made earlier, some warm water, olive oil, and vanilla. Then you want to mix this until it's thoroughly combined. No lumps. Your batter is going to be very runny. This is normal for this particular cake mix. Don't worry.
Listen to me now.
When you're making frosting, you need powdered sugar. You know, powdered sugar is like really, really fine, so when you mix it with the butter, it creates that fluffy, that creamy, dreamy like texture that we get with icing. But powdered sugar is really just white cane sugar with cornstarch grinded really fine. So we're gonna make our own powdered sugar. Currently, for all you manufacturers out there, can you please sell powdered coconut sugar? It'd be awesome. But until they do that, you're going to take coconut sugar, add it to a food processor, a Vitamix, a dry Vitamix, not a wet one because it'll get kind of gunky. And you're going to add either cornstarch. I'm using arrowroot powder, which acts as the same. You're just going to blend it till it's really fine. So you just pour it in there, add some arrowroot powder. And for those of you who are concerned with measurements, don't. Just use your intuition. It's okay. You can release a little. And that's it. To make my frosting, I started off with vegan butter. Then I added my homemade powdered coconut sugar. Followed by melted chocolate chips, and then coconut cream to round it out. Now at this point, it's a little runny, so I set it in the fridge to get firm overnight. Once it firmed up, I blended it again until I got that perfect texture. So before I learned how to make coconut powdered sugar, icing was such a challenge. Like, I tried maple syrup, foolishness. It was just like runny cream. I tried just using the coconut sugar. The crystals were too large, so it would never really cream. But now, look at this. I mean, this is the epitome of like fluffy. It holds its shape. You know what I mean? Like, that's what you're looking for. So when you put it on there, it sticks. So this is a game changer. It's so delicious. It tastes like toffee with like notes of coffee and cinnamon, and this is so good. So yeah, let's frost the cake.
But it just ain't no use giving up.